I think we can all agree that prepping is vital right now, but what prepping doesn't need to be is expensive.
We've spent the last 34 years of our married life learning how to live on a very tight budget, but getting the things that we really want.
So drawing on those years of experience, in this video, we will share with you ways that you can prep for emergencies, natural disasters, or even broken supply lines, and do it without breaking your budget. And we want you to stick with us to the very end of the video, because the last point we're going to give you is seriously the most important piece of advice that we can give.
Hi, in case you're new here, I'm Larry.
And I'm Hope.
And we're from Under the Median, where every week we bring you videos on practical frugality.
And it doesn't get any more practical than prepping for possible emergencies. Let's get right into the topic for the video. The first thing that you need to determine is your budget for prepping. Now, nearly everybody has a prepping budget. It just might be hidden in with their other budget categories. We're going to give you some examples. For instance, if you feel like you want to prep to make sure that your pantry is fully supplied, but you don't have any extra money, that's okay, because it can be as simple as going to the store every week and just picking up 2 or 3 extra items. That doesn't cost a lot of extra money, and you absolutely will not have to put more money into your food budget category. So go and get a can of corn. You're planning to make some corn, get a can of corn, and then just get 2 or 3 extra cans of corn to take home. And in no time at all, honestly, you will have a lot more in your pantry.
It's amazing how much it builds up
really quickly.
Yeah, so you have a good store of food in case you can't go out and get some. The same principle applies for first aid medications and over-the-counter medications. As you need those, pick up some extra, put those in a cupboard so you have some extra on hand in case of an emergency. You know, there's always times when we can't get out. Let's take a major snowstorm in the wintertime. Roads might not be passable. In the summertime, we might have storms that bring trees down, so we can't get out. So we're not talking about, end of the world prepping. We're talking about practical prepping here.
Now, once you have a budget established, the next thing that you need is a plan.
Yes. Without a plan, you don't get anything done. Let's take a sailing vessel, for instance. If you just put a sailboat out in the water with no rudder, it's not going to go anywhere. The plan is that rudder. It tells the boat where to go. The plan tells you where you're going.
A great place to store your plan, and we're going to tell you how to do some research and give you some suggestions on that. But once you have a plan in place, creating a family emergency preparedness binder for your home, super great idea. We actually got the idea from this book, Prepping 101. It's written by Kathy Harrison, and we highly recommend this book.
This is a very well organized book. It's easy to read, it's laid out nicely, and it's very practical.
Here's a closer look at the topics that are actually covered in that book. But drawing on what I've learned from the book, this family preparedness manual, she tells you exactly what to put in that manual, how to make it waterproof, and where you should maybe store that manual in order to keep it safe.
Look for the link for the book in our video description. That way you'll be able to go right to it.
I'll put a section in the video description called recommended products from this video, and then you'll know right where to look for it. The third thing you need to do is read and research, and you need to do it now. We are often people who are driven by outside influences. So something happens, we react to it. Something happens, we react to it. But in this case, you need to react before something happens.
Yeah, in order to be prepared, that's what prepared means. It means you're prepared ahead of time. You need to do a little planning. You need to look at what items you might need in your home. In the case of an emergency, you need to know where they're going to be at, how to use them, all of the above. That's pre-planning and getting prepared.
Now, as you begin your research, we suggest that you keep a list of topics that you know I need to know more about these topics. There's always something more to learn.
Oh, yeah.
So having that list handy, oftentimes you'll read something when you're researching, you'll think, I literally don't remember where I even read that at. Having a document, a one-page document that you print out that says, this is where I'm at with this skill. Here's what I still need to learn. And here's where I'm going to look to find that information. That's just gold to me. It just helps keep it all organized, so you know where you're going.
Speaking of skills, get some. None of us knows it all, so don't worry about knowing it all, but try to pick up on some skills that are easy to obtain and are maybe right up your alley.
Let's just give a for instance of you've decided that you want to master cooking over an open fire. Well, really all that takes is one of those backyard fire pits and a way to suspend or elevate the food over the fire pit, and maybe some cast iron pots and pans.
Like a Dutch oven.
Like a Dutch oven. And then a cookbook that's going to tell you how to cook in cast iron over a fire. Those kind of cookbooks exist.
And it's always good to practice this before you get into the emergency. So give it a dry run beforehand.
Try some recipes and practice the skill. And pretty soon you'll be ready to move on to the next item on your list that is the next thing that you'd like to master. But don't get overwhelmed. Don't get frustrated. Don't panic. And don't try to learn it all at once.
You'll want to create a prioritized supply list that's divided into categories.
We suggest the following categories for your supply list: food, non-food items. Now, we did an entire video that we shared 60 non-food items that you want to have in your prepper pantry. I'm going to make sure that that video is linked up above and in the description of this video. First aid, another important category: natural remedies, lighting, heating, cooling, cooking. Now, we've done actually individual videos, I think, on every single one of those prepping ideas and supplies you're going to need for each of those areas. So I'm just going to create a playlist for you, and I'll make sure that that playlist, that prepping playlist, is listed in the description of the video.
You'll want to create a prioritized list on things you need to obtain as soon as possible.
There are going to be some things that are really important that you'll think, boy, I better get that right now. Now, our suggestion is to take each of those categories we just talked about, pick the top 4 maybe and in each of those categories, and really focus on those, the 4 most important items. Because remember, the list is prioritized, which means the most important things go at the top of the list. Now, once you have those things, you're going to kind of rest easier at night and know at least you have a basic idea in mind of what you're going to do in case stuff hits the fan.
We would suggest that you start with food and water. Those are the 2 most important resources we need in order to survive.
And remember, in addition to food and water, you have to have a way to cook it. So you'll need to think through that ahead of time as well. When it comes to water, know the closest source of fresh water that is available to you.
And along with that, you'll want a way to be able to purify that water. So we would suggest, if you can't afford a big system like our Alexa Pure, we have an Alexa Pure. It holds about 3 gallons of purified water, but it is a little expensive. And there's always a Berkey. Those are really good systems. But they make a lot of portable camping systems for purifying water. They'll do that for individuals. I went backpacking up in the mountains in the 80s, and I had a little pump system. It was just a small system, and I could purify about a quart of water in just a few minutes. And it makes the difference between staying healthy and being very sick. One year I went up in the mountains thinking I could just drink the water out of the lakes and streams, and boy, did I pay for that. So I learned that you've got to have good purified water in order to live.
Yeah, those life straws, they're not terribly expensive. Just getting one of those life straws for each person in your family, that would be a really quick and easy thing to be able to do that's not going to cost you a whole lot of money.
One good way to think about prepping and being prepared for emergencies, especially if you're a camper, think about what you would need if you were out doing some wilderness tent camping. Most of the items that you will be using would be very helpful in the case of an emergency. So think about what you would pick up for camping and get a hold of some of those items, put those in your pantry or in your storage areas. That will help you too to be totally prepared for emergency situations.
The next thing we'd like to suggest to you is that when it comes to prepping, that you consider carefully items which have multiple uses. I'm going to give you a really quick example. My dehydrator. Now, when I say dehydrator, a lot of you are like, well, it dehydrates food. A really good quality dehydrator can do a lot more than just suck the water out of fruits or vegetables. My Excalibur 9 tray dehydrator, I absolutely love it, and I use it all the time. In fact, I'll put a link to it in the description of the video so you can take a look at it. But let me just give you a really quick rundown of some of the things that you can do with the Excalibur. Yes, of course, you can dry fruits and vegetables, but you can also culture yogurt in it. You can make fruit leather, banana chips, kale chips. You can make homemade beef jerky if you eat meat. You can make homemade crackers. You can dry herbs. You can dry bread cubes to make croutons. And then you can always crush up those croutons and make some bread crumbs. You can proof bread dough in your Excalibur. You can soak nuts and then dehydrate them. You can soak walnuts, roll them in sugar and cinnamon. You know those kiosks at the mall?
Oh, yeah.
Like during the holidays where you pay like buku bucks to buy those fancy walnuts and almonds. You can do that in your dehydrator. There you go. I just made your day. You can also make homemade granola or homemade grape nut cereal, all that in the Excalibur. Now you can see what I'm talking about just with that one example. Always ask yourself before you buy something to prep, especially if it's really, really pricey, how many tasks will this take care of for me? Is this a one-off thing? It's only going to do one thing, or does it do more than one thing?
And once again, this is something you'll want to do ahead of time. You want to dry these fruits and granola and so on ahead of time. Have some in your storage so that if you're out of power and you need to grab hold of something that'll give you some good, quick nourishment, that will be a great thing to be able to draw from. Another thing you can do is share the cost of a high-price piece of equipment with another family. Hope has a really good example of this.
I actually just had a discussion with our friend Dennis Hitchcock, who is quite the homesteader. And he mentioned to me that families in their area are becoming very, very interested in homemade freeze drying units. Now they run, I think, $2,500 to $3,500 each. Tell us in the comments section, have you heard of this? And do you actually own one of these home freeze drying units? One of the things families in their area are talking about doing is 4 or 5 of them going together to purchase one, and then it's like a cooperative type situation where everybody gets to use the unit. And that's a really good way to think about it. You want to buy with somebody you know real well, and they're going to have your back. But that's a great way to approach it. If you have a really slim budget when it comes to prepping, just to go together with some other families.
You know, in my family, they had a family garden. I guess in the, in the World War II times, they called those victory gardens. But they shared garden space with about 2 or 3 other major families and were able to raise crops that they could all then can and have something in the basement in glass jars for to eat through the winter time. So that's another good example of sharing what you have with other people.
We want you to remember that there's generally always more than one way to get something done. So always be aware that when you hear something, you're going to go, oh, I don't know, I really need that, but I can't afford it. Look around. Find out what it is about that piece of equipment that you really need. Maybe there's some features that you really don't need. Find out like the range of prices, look for reviews, and then see, most importantly, if there's a way you can get the same job done for a whole lot less money, because a lot of times there is. This book that we mentioned earlier, it's also super good for that because nearly every chapter, she has ways for you to do things less expensively.
You know, going right along with all of that, another thing that you can do is barter for what you need. So you have skills that other people don't have. They have skills that you need. Yeah. Well, work out a way that you can exchange those skills so that you're not spending any money and they're not out any money. And then you're getting the things that you need, and so are they from your own resources. It's a very important thing to be thinking about, especially in these tight times that we're in.
One of the things that we think is really important to do that you may not think of along these lines is that you want to keep a physical list of names, addresses, and telephone numbers. We have become like a Google it society. And we push a button and they automatically dial. The phone dials. You don't know what their phone number is. It just automatically dialed. And I think we need to consider in terms of electricity may be sporadic. The internet may be sporadic. The cell phone signals may be sporadic. Now, are we telling you this is going to happen? We don't know, but we think it's great to think about preparing for that by having that physical list available.
You'll want to foster friendships with like-minded people. You can work off of each other, and each of you can kind of generate different ideas. Another person might have an idea that you haven't thought of. So there's a kind of a synergy between 2 or 3 families working together on these things.
There are groups you can join on the internet, but a lot of times these days there are also local groups that you can join. We suggest taking preparedness, like home canning courses through the local cooperative extension service. They are really inexpensive courses. I took a canning course and a bread making course, and there were several courses I took when the kids were young, and they really did not cost very much money at all.
Safety and first aid classes are important too. You might want to add that to your list. Medical costs are pretty high, and medical people may not be around when there's an emergency, and it's really good to know what you can do, what you can use with things that are on hand as tourniquets and so on. So it's always good to take a good first aid class.
Stay aware of what's happening. Seriously, there has never been a more important time, I think, to just be aware of where you can go and who you can go to that's going to give you balanced information that is factual. Because there's a lot of stuff floating around right now, and I'm not saying all of it's right or all of it's wrong, but I think it's really good to have some people that you know well enough that you can trust what they're telling you, and that you can act on that. So look around for people that you can trust. There's a lot of YouTube channels. We really like City Prepping. Tell us in the comment section, who are your favorite prepping channels? Who do you think they give really sound advice? City Prepping, definitely one of the channels that we highly recommend. He does a lot of research. He's very well spoken and very well put together videos.
Yeah, they're extremely well researched. There's a lot of good homesteading videos out there too. These are people that are living off grid. They're on their own. Maybe some of them have come from a city background and they had no knowledge of living off grid. Great resources to pull from.
We just found one today. Do you remember I think it's Off the Grid with Dan and Stacy or something like that. One of you is going to know who these people are. Tell me in the comment section. I think it's Off Grid Living with Dan and Stacy or something.
I'll put it right down here.
Yeah, tell us. It's one of you who knows. Tell us in the comment section who it is that we're talking about, because we thought they were really, really good, and we were completely unaware of them until today, and we found them. We really, really like them a lot.
Oh yeah. Books are a great resource, and I would suggest getting some books on these topics and reading them, like this one here.
Physical books.
Yeah, good DIY.
E-books are great, but what if,
What if you can't get the internet? I mean, if we can't get the internet, it's not going to do any good. So I'm in agreement. I like to read real books. I was just reading one tonight. And you want to get books that have to do with these topics, books that are about self-sufficiency, good cookbooks, books on natural medicine, and books that teach you skills that you can use to live by when things change.
All right, this is your chance to talk to us in the comments section. We're actually accruing some of these books right now. What do we need in our preparedness library? Tell us in the comment section what books you really, really recommend.
You want to make sure that you test out any equipment that you're going to be using in an emergency situation. You want to check it out, make sure you're familiar with it. You know its ins and outs, its limitations, and its uses. Make sure that you know how to operate it. So get the owner's manual out and get that piece of equipment and put it to use. I have power stations that we use. I actually use these on a weekly basis. We keep stuff charged up using the solar charging capabilities, and I know exactly how to set those up and how to get the most out of the sun when those are charging. It's good to know what they'll do. How quickly will they discharge? How long will they run an item? How much can you cook on a camp stove with using white gas? How long will that last you? You need to know all those things if you're going to be out of your normal routine for a while.
And if you want to know more about some of the equipment that we have available for off-grid living in case the power goes down and like the rolling blackouts they've been telling us might happen yet this summer, we did a whole video on it and showed you what we had on hand. That video is right over there, and you want to give it a watch next.
Speaking of spills,
Were we?